Hello everybody, my name is Joshua and I'd like to welcome you back to another episode of Coffee, Cats, and King, where we discuss books, both new and old. I'll share with you pictures of my cats will make you wish they were your cats, and I'm drinking enough coffee for me and everybody watching. Yes, I had to look down and make sure this was actually open before I stuck my mouth to it and made a fool of myself. If you saw my last video, it was just a quick catch up, giving you guys an idea of some of the things that I'm changing and that I have coming in the new year. This video is kind of a cool one because I am getting rid of the typical TBR. This was my way of saying, okay, well, let me go through my bookshelves, pick out 50 books that I know for a fact I have to get to this year, and it will still give you folks something to kind of look forward to. So I have done that. I have them separated out somewhat into horror, science fiction and fantasy, series, and then other, which is a mix of stuff, you'll see. Before we get into the video, I do want to show off one thing, one Christmas present that was just so incredibly cool. Another one from my sibling Shy. So I was always a huge fan of Courage the Cowardly Dog, still am. As an adult, I will watch Courage the Cowardly Dog, believe me. And I got Shy into it at a young age as well. And it was just one of the things that we kind of bonded over because there's a fairly large age gap between us as siblings. And so, for Christmas, Shy got me this awesome Courage print signed by the creator of Courage the Cowardly Dog. And it's just so cool. It's him with Courage sitting there in his lap, with cats on the TV here, and some of the other villains in the background and that. And he signed it down here, and Shy said to Joshua, "The reason I love old cartoons and space ducks." And I just thought it was the coolest thing in the world. So I have that prominently displayed on my shelves here now. And it's just, it's one of the coolest Christmas presents I think I've gotten, so I thought it was really awesome and had to share it with you guys. I'm sure some of you were fans of Courage back in the day and still are. It was one of the few shows that was horror-esque that was for kids for that time period. But that done with, I want to go on and jump into the books because I have so many to show off. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about each individual one because obviously that would take way too long. So I may just briefly describe it and know that you will see all of these in upcoming videos this year. And if there are any in particular that you are really excited about, let me know down below. I'll see, maybe I can make those a priority, or we can just chat about them down there. So because the series happen to be right here beside me, I'm going to start with the series. The first series is a trilogy that I think most of you are going to be familiar with. This is the Strain trilogy. Starts with the Strain. If I'm not mistaken, then it is the Night Eternal, and then the Fall. This was turned into a very popular TV show as well. I have not read a thing from Chuck Hogan before, but considering that Mr. Del Toro is involved, I know this is going to be, I know it's going to be good. Now, this one may or may not be cheating as far as calling it a series, but I think it counts. This is R.L. Stine with Fear Street: The Beginning, and this is an omnibus of the first four in the Fear Street series. And again, I want to make this a priority because I did not really get the opportunity to read Fear Street properly. I've read books here and there, but At the time that I was growing up, it was all about Goosebumps. I kind of missed the Fear Street moments, and so it's been really hit or miss as far as what I've read from Fear Street and what I haven't. So this, I finally get a chance to experience the beginning, just as it says. Alright, next up is a fantasy trilogy that I just acquired last year, that I have been tremendously excited about. This starts with Thorn, goes into The Theft of Sunlight, and ends with A Darkness at the Door. So these books are all written by Isitar Kanani, and all of these are signed. Actually, I got them directly from her. So these are a mix of classic fairy tale elements mixed with fantasy as well as some real life mythology, and I have been so excited to get into these ever since they made it here. But again, because of that pesky TBR from last year, I felt like I couldn't commit, because then, I don't know, in my head, you know, gosh forbid I pick up this one and don't immediately pick up the others. But it was such a commitment that it was totally me, but I was overwhelming myself. But now I am really excited to get into them. There are not many times in fantasy where you can just finish a trilogy and be done with that world. So I'm looking forward to that. It seems like nowadays a lot of fantasy series are, you know, hitting book 20, and that is overwhelming. So I'm looking forward to just a good YA fantasy trilogy with some fairy tale elements, because you know I love my fairy tales. Next one is also a trilogy. This one is more of a dark fantasy, supernatural, definitely horror elements as well. This starts with Sully Beach and the Dying Light, goes into Sully Beach and the Hungry Souls, and ends with Sully Beach and the Binding Blood. And this is a series that, again, I got directly from the author last year. I believe that they are a new author, Skelly Harrington, which is a pretty cool name. And this series starts off with this strange woman coming to town. She dies suddenly, and when she does, it's almost like these weird powers she had are transferred to Sully Beach, our main character, along with this ghost child that seems to be following her around. So I'm really interested to get into this. Like I said, it is very much dark fantasy and outright horror as well. I mean, it just sounded so great the way that the author sold it to me. So this one is definitely high on my list, one that I anticipate getting to sooner rather than later. The last one is Gary Wolfe's Who Censored Roger Rabbit, Who Plugged Roger Rabbit, and Who Whacked Roger Rabbit. All of these are also signed by Gary and by Roger Rabbit himself. Just want to point that out. Very cool. And this, so one of my favorite movies of all time is Who Framed Roger Rabbit. And it was years before I found out that it was based on a book series. And once I found out, I also realized that these books are not necessarily easy to get a hold of. So I have been on the hunt for a long time on eBay, and I happened upon this listing with these three signed by him. I immediately jumped on it. It was quite expensive. But I think it is going to be well worth it. If these are anything like the movie, then I know this is going to turn into one of my favorite series. And so again, another one that I think I'll get to sooner rather than later, because I've just been dying to get into the world of Roger Rabbit. Alright, next up we're going to get into the science fiction and fantasy. This is my shortest stack, I'd say, but I have some heavy hitters in here. So, first up, a book that I have heard about for years and years and have always wanted to pick up. Again, finally found a copy at Goodwill. This is Peter Watts with Starfish. And again, I'm not going to get into crazy detail on these books, but I will say that this is one that I've always been told is not just your typical science fiction. This gets very deep into body horror and into some really messed up, grotesque things. So I'm very much looking forward to this. Another one that is kind of a mix of horror and science fiction, and that's always a win in my book. Next up is one that I know a few of you out there are really going to be excited about this book. Andrew in particular makes me think of you. This is Michael Warren Lucas with Prohibition Orcs. And it is just what it says. This is in America where orcs, elves, goblins, they all live there with us. And the orcs are kind of the working class. So when the prohibition happens, they're the guys that are suffering the worst, and they're the guys that are going to do something about it, fight back against the police, try and sell it illegally if they need to. And it was just such an interesting concept. Alright, next up is Marissa Meyer with Cinder. Again, getting into fairy tale retellings here. This is, if I'm not mistaken, a science fiction, maybe steampunk-ish or cyberpunk-ish retelling of fairy tales. This is part of a series, but I did not include it with my series because this is the only one that I have. I have not read a thing from Marissa Meyer, but towards the tail end of last year I picked up this, and I picked up one other by her, Heartless, which is part of a different series. But I thought I would start with this one. Again, fairy tales usually are a win in my book, and this is one that, people love this series. So I figured this would be a great starting place, and if it works out, then hey, I have a place to go from here. Okay, this is a book that I've had on my shelves now for probably 4 or 5 years. But I've been saving it for this year. This is The Savage Report, 1994. And for whatever reason, I got it in my head when I got this book, even though it is probably going to be really terrible, that I was going to save this for 2024, the year that I turned 30, and the year that The Savage Report would also turn 30, even though the book itself was 50 years old. The Savage Report, 1994, and me are 30, and we were going to experience it together and see see just what the world was supposed to be like in 1994. Next up, this is another one that is the start of a series, but this is the only book that I own. Another one that I have heard many things about for a long time now. This is Mark Lawrence with Prince of Thorns. This is fantasy. This is very dark fantasy. In fact, this is grim dark fantasy, which means don't get attached to characters because they're probably going to die, even if they're main characters. And if they don't die, awful, horrible things are going to happen to them. So just be ready for that too. And I have heard nothing but good things about this book from those who actually completed. The negatives that I've heard are that it is too graphic and too violent, and people just can't deal with it. So of course it sounds right up my alley, right? And this next one I picked up when my wife and I went to DC. We stopped at a bookshop there, and the cover immediately drew me in on this. And it is another one that gets into fairy tales and mythology. This is Gabrielle Savit with The Way Back. This beautiful cover here. This is about a little riverside village that is overrun with demons. And one night the Angel of Death comes in and decides to send these 2 children off on a journey to the far country to make pacts with the ancient demons, and end this reign of demons in their town, essentially. It's a book that I know I need to get to this year and share with you folks, because it sounds like one that a lot of you would enjoy as well. This is going to be my first reread that you guys have seen on here. I did read this book probably, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago. But this is Adrien Chovsky with Spiderlight. And this is a book that I purchased, read it and loved it, and then got rid of my copy with a bunch of other books that I shouldn't have gotten rid of. Finally got another copy, and I'm really looking forward to reading this again. This is that rarity of all rarities, a fantasy standalone novel that is not 9,000 pages either. And this one is just very unique. It gets into human and animal rights in a very interesting way that I won't spoil for anyone. But I will say that Spiderlight thing, it matters. If you have a fear of spiders, this is not a book for you whatsoever, because one of the main characters happens to be like a half human, half spider hybrid thing. So, yeah. Excellent, excellent, excellent fantasy novel, though. Again, almost grimdark. It is very horror-esque, and if you were a fan of the Warhammer books, you'd probably really dig that book. Okay, this one should come as no surprise. If you guys saw me rave about how much I loved Legends and Lattes, of course, I immediately went out and ended up purchasing the follow-up, which is actually, I think, a prequel. This is Bookshops and Bone Dust. And I have no doubt that this is going to be a 5-star, one of the best books that I read this year, if it is anything like Legends and Lattes. And actually, I've heard from multiple people now, some of which are even reputable sources, that this is maybe even slightly better than Legends and Lattes, which I don't know how that would be possible, but hey, we'll see. So, have to get to that, of course, this year. No surprises there. And then the final one in the science fiction fantasy category is a book that I've neglected for far too long. And yes, I feel shame over this. I feel like someone like Michael K. Vaughan would probably shame me over this and sentence me to flogging or something. I have yet to read Frank Herbert's Dune, so I'm correcting that this year. I'm sorry. Please say you'll still love me. I'll do better, I promise. I'm fixing it. I'm reading it this year. Alright, next up is my other category. I said this is a mix of all kinds of stuff, so it's just other. Okay, I talked about this in one of my last videos of last year, that I got into Lee Perry's A Skeleton in the Closet series years ago now. Absolutely loved the first couple of books and then never purchased the rest of them and finished the series. Why? I don't know, but I'm going to fix that. So, I only have book 1 here, so I'm only counting this as 1, even though I do have a couple more of the books over there. But just let it be known that I will be reading this entire series this year. It will happen. It has to happen, because it is still my favorite cozy mystery, period, and is definitely going to be my favorite cozy mystery series, period. So I have to get into this, and more so, I should really get Paige to read them as well. Next up is one that some of you may think a little strange, but bear with me. Young Josh used to watch wrestling, even though he knew that it was technically fake, but through his own training and practices also knew how much it hurts to fake those things. So my favorite wrestler at the time was Mick Foley. He was known by multiple names. This one, Mankind, was one of his personas, if you will, who was just really known for taking a beating, and Mick Foley really put his body on the line as this character, and this is his big kind of tell-all memoir about it. This thing is 750 pages, it's super intimidating, and young Joshua at one point bought this book and then was so intimidated by it that he ended up giving it to Goodwill and never reading it. So young Joshua, this is 30-year-old Joshua. We are going to fix this problem. We are going to read all about Mankind, his history, his matches, his injuries, and we're going to fix this issue that you started years and years ago. Okay. Next up is one that I found at Goodwill last year that I've never heard of, even though it sounds like such a Joshua book. And sounds like it would be one of those classics that you would have to read for school, but I've never even heard of it. So this is William Butler with The Butterfly Revolution. And this takes place at a summer camp for boys, and kind of has a setup similar to Lord of the Flies, with, as it says, a little mix of Animal Farm. And that everything about that sounds like a Joshua book. It sounds like a book that I should have read and loved for years now, and I haven't. So this is a book that I have to get to. Next up, I still have not read any Jennifer McMahon books. So this is the only Jennifer McMahon book that I have. Therefore, this is going to be my first Jennifer McMahon book. I know it's not one that people talk about and rave about or anything like that, but I figure that if she can enthrall me enough with this, that I can get into some of the books that people do talk about and rave about a lot. On a similar note, I still have not read any Karen Slaughter. And again, this is the only Karen Slaughter that I own, and I have been told that this woman is pretty brutal. So we'll see how this goes. But again, just an author that I've neglected, that people keep telling me I need to read. So it's time to read. Okay, for a story that I have always wanted to read and never got a chance to read, this is Diane Setterfield with The 13th Tale. And man, this is a gorgeous, gorgeous book. Look at that inside, deckle-edged. I mean, this is just a beautiful friggin' book. This book is just too beautiful to sit on my shelf and not be read. Okay, this next part I feel is designed just to make Troy happy. So Troy, this is for you. You sent me this one, and I've been meaning to pick it up. And so my friend, it is time that I read August Wilson with Fences. He talked about this in one of his videos last year. I wanted to read it immediately, did not get to read it. Got tucked away on my shelf again and kind of got lost in the shuffle. But this is the year of the play for me, so I'll be reading this. And in addition, also exclusively for you, Troy, I will be reading Clive Barker's Incarnations and Forms of Heaven. This is 3 plays by Clive. This is 3 plays by Clive. I am a huge Clive Barker fan. These were 2 books that I picked up that I have never heard anybody talk about. That's right, I'm getting to 3 books of plays this year. You should be very proud of me. Okay, this one is another book like The 13th Tale that is just too beautiful to sit on my shelves and not read. And it is another classic that many of us know and love. This is Kenneth Graham with The Wind in the Willows. And I got this sort of deluxe edition, and this thing is just incredible. There is artwork on every single page. And I mean, that is amazing. It is so beautiful. I have not read this since I was a child, and I certainly did not read it like this. So this is a book, again, that I just got at the end of the year and knew that I had to dive into it early in this year because this is just the most beautiful edition I've ever seen of it. And I need to read it. These last two are nonfiction. This one is going to be a tough one. This is Rebeca Godfrey with Under the Bridge. This is about a rather famous murder that occurred, perpetrated by teenagers against another teenager. There are movies based on this murder. There are multiple songs, poetry, and this is going to be heartbreaking, and I know it is. And it intimidates me because of that. So I've had it on my shelf for a while, but it's time that I just suck it up and read it. And then the last nonfiction is David Attenborough with The Living Planet, which again is, I know, going to be just an absolutely stunning book inside. I need to know more about the world I live in. I think we all do. And so I'm hoping that Mr. Attenborough here can help me. And last but certainly not least, let's get into the horror. The very first book is one that I bought a couple of years ago, found it off eBay. Again, I don't know anything about it. I haven't seen another copy of this book before. But this is one that I bought with a very particular intention, and after we lost PAX, that has really brought this back to focus for me. So I bought this book, Cryptobazaro, with the intention of reading these short stories on here with you folks, sharing them with you because they're very short and they're very much reminiscent of the scary stories to tell in the dark from back in the day. Pax, of course, we know, she loved to get creepy, weird children's books and read them on her channel. So my intention and my little tribute to her, if you will, is I would love to go through this book with you folks and just read a story at a time, kind of in memory of her. So if none of these others happen, this is one that I want to happen this year. On a lighter note, you guys know that I love some Thomas Tryon. One of my favorite books now is Harvest Home, and although he did not write long enough to put that much out there, one of the few things left that I have not read from him is The Night of the Moonbow. And this, I don't even know anything about it. Between Harvest Home and the other, this guy, I feel like can do no wrong. So I'm really looking forward to getting to that this year. I also really want to read this newest Christina Henry book. This is Good Girls Don't Die. And this is another interesting one where it's multiple women, all in very different situations, who are somehow tied together in that they feel like something happened in their lives where they're not where they're supposed to be. They've kind of fallen into a crack, if you will, fallen into a hole, a la Alice style, and they don't know how to get out. They don't know how to get back to their proper happily ever after. It's been too long since I've read any Christina Henry, and I really love her stuff and want to get back into it. There's a whole series of books back here that I said I was going to read. These guys here, that I said I had to read last year, didn't read. So at the very least, this year I need to read the first the first of these Black Wings of Cthulhu books, because these books are insanely collectible, very hard to get a hold of, and if this is not for me, then I need to sell these to somebody who's going to enjoy them, because they're beautiful books. I need to either enjoy them or I need to get them to someone that is going to enjoy them. Now this one I just picked up yesterday, so yeah. So much for book buying ban, right? But it's a new year, so we'll be starting something like that again. Anyhow, I did pick this up last night. I am not the biggest Grady Hendrix fan. His writing doesn't always seem to work for me. I enjoyed Horror Store, but I've had a hard time finding one that really works for me other than that. However, one thing that he did that has really worked out is he brought Paperbacks from Hell. And so all these books are being brought back that have been out of print for years and years that you just can't get unless you want to spend obscene amounts of money on eBay or something. And one that I have wanted to read since the first time that I laid eyes on it is Joan Samson with The Auctioneer. So if Grady did anything right, it was in getting these books back on shelves, back where they're readily available for people. And this is one that has eluded me for years that I just can't wait to dive into this year. Probably, if not this month, then certainly next month. Of course, there had to be some King on here. I do not have many gaps when it comes to King's writing, but there are a few oddities, if you will. One of which is that I just never seem to have run into a copy of The Dead Zone. So I've never read The Dead Zone. And in going to Goodwill the other day, I found this beat up copy of The Dead Zone. So finally, 30 years in, probably 20 of them being a King fan, I'm going to get to read The Dead Zone. So of course this is a must read for the year because I just can't have gaps like that when the name of my channel is Coffee Cats and King. Similarly, but not on as extreme a level, another book that is a classic of the genre that I just have never read that I need to correct is James Herbert's The Rats. So I'll be getting to this year as well. Another book that is just, again, so very much a Josh sounding book that I've heard so many good things about, that I've had on my shelf now for a year almost, and I haven't picked up. This year I will read Blake Crouch's Dark Matter, which sounds like such a spooky, delicious, delightful book that I can't wait to eat it up. I know I'm going to eat it up. This is probably going to be one of those books that I read in one sitting, in fact. Basically, this gentleman is kidnapped, and he wakes up, and his life is totally different. His wife is a different woman. Actually a different woman than who he remembers. He doesn't have a child anymore. And instead of just being a college professor, he is now this supposed genius who achieved something impossible, whatever the something may be. So his life is totally different. This is somewhat science fiction, of course, but it is also very horror-esque, and it just sounds like a very Josh book. I've heard that it reads like a trippy episode of The Twilight Zone almost, or something out of X-Files, so there you go. Gotta get to it. Another one that I was so excited for last year, got a copy and then never read, was Craig DeLuy with Episode 13. This is supposed to be found footage in a book. Enough said. It's a long one. It's about 450 pages. But found footage, love the whole genre. I'm one of those guys that can watch found footage movies all day. So to experience it in the book is a very rare thing, and I'm really hoping that he pulls it off in this one. Filling another one of those gaps that should have been filled years ago. I have a bunch of Peter Straub's backlist and just haven't read through them. And considering that the man passed away last year, I feel that it's time to read some of his stuff. So I'm starting with one of his best known books, Ghost Story, which is another hefty one. Despite looking fairly small, this book is actually 550 pages, over 550 pages in fact. But this one is supposed to be one of the classics from him, and this will be me again kind of redeeming myself, if you will, in that little gap in my horror knowledge. Yes, I'm counting this as one because I'm insane. I have read this before, but it is time for a reread. I'm going back to the roots, back to the classics. And this year I will be reading the entire complete fiction of H.P. Lovecraft for probably the 5th or 6th time. This will be, again, another reread for me. Reread. Anyway. But it's time. It's been a while. I'm ready to get into it. Okay. If you had asked me back 10 years ago for a list of my favorite authors, one of those names in the top 10 would have been Gary Bronbeck. Gary Bronbeck writes horror in a way that other people just don't. And if you've not experienced a Gary Bronbeck book, you're doing yourself a disservice, because his horror is that rare kind that will make you feel every emotion you can feel. It will make you cry, whether you're the type of person that typically cries or not. I don't think I got through a Gary Bronbeck book without shedding some tears, in fact. Whilst them still being excellent horror novels. And he had this collection of short stories, this rather hefty collection of short stories that was long out of print and just impossible to find. And one day I was surfing around Amazon and found in their bargain books for $3 a copy of that book. So I have it. I've had it on my shelf now for a long time. Never picked it up because, again, it's a hefty one. It's 600 pages and it's a big book. But it is time to rekindle that love that I had of Gary Bronbeck, remind myself of why he was one of my favorite authors, and maybe through this pick up some of his novels again, because the man just writes in a way and on subjects that others don't want to touch, that they can't competently touch. And Bronbeck does it in such a way that it's beautiful and heart-wrenching at the same time. This next one, I think the whole series now, but I've never read any of them. But this one in particular I want to get to. This is from the Nightmare Club series, and this is Nick Barron with Sleigh Ride. Now this is a book that I picked up exclusively because Cameron Chaney said that this is the darkest YA he has ever read. When I heard that, I knew I needed to read this book. Unfortunately, again, very hard to get, but I found an almost complete collection of the Nightmare Club books on eBay. Again, kind of pricey, but when the individual books are so pricey, it's not so bad buying the bundles. So this one in particular, I love Christmas-themed horror. This takes place around that time, and again, darkest YA he's ever read. Sign me up. Some of you may be familiar with the artwork of Trevor Henderson. He has done illustrations and artwork all online. Just look up his stuff and you'll see it's creepy and weird and so much fun. It'll send little shivers of excitement and terror down your spine, and it's great. And towards the tail end of last year, he put out his first ever book, and it's from Scholastic, so it's a kids horror, in fact, and there are illustrations from him throughout, but this is his first published work like this. So Scare Waves, gotta give it a read. Very excited about this. This is an author that I became familiar with last year, and this is her first book. So again, I knew that I had to purchase it as soon as it came out. I had it pre-ordered because I wanted to support her, and I've been looking forward to reading ever since. This is Alex Woodrow with Whisperwood, and she was part of one of the anthologies that I read that was in support of the LGBT community. I loved her writing in that short story and what she had to say in the introduction and forward to that collection. So I've been very highly anticipating her first work, and I saved the best for last. This is another reread and another book that I could easily replace with 4 books and probably still come out ahead. but I am a crazy person. So for the probably 5th or 6th time, I will be reading Stephen King's complete and uncut The Stand. That's right, I could hide behind this thing. Yeah, I'm nuts, I know. So, it's time. It's time. It's been too long since I've done a reread. Let's just do it. So there you go, folks. That completes this very lengthy little video. Those are 50 books that I have to read this year. If I read no others, then these 50 will be read. Please let me know what you think below. If you're interested in any in particular that you want a little more information on, let me know. If you've read some of them and can give me some insight, again, do the same. Or if you have suggestions for books that you're like, man, I know Josh would love this book. He needs to read this book this year. Again, put them down below. I'm always looking forward to recommendations myself and looking forward to giving you guys recommendations. This was a really long video, so again, no cat footage. I apologize. You haven't had it yet this year, but you will in the video following that. I'll make sure of it. So, thank you all for joining me. Let me know what you think below. Stay safe. Drink great coffee. Cheers.